Hi, my name is Dr. Padilla. I'm a professor in computer science and psychology, and I've been a professor for over 5 years now. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic that I think has made a major impact on my career success, and that's finding your research community as a PhD student. You might think that as a PhD student, it's maybe a little too early to start networking or really finding your tribe. It is not too early, and I think the practice of identifying who you're comfortable with, the people that will support you, the individuals that you can collaborate with, will really help your long-term research success. So let's jump on in. So first, let's talk about why networking matters in your PhD. The truth is that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And you will go through many different periods of your PhD journey and beyond. So you really want people that you can connect with through that entire process. They might end up being the individuals who hire you for a job, who provide you materials that help you get grants or papers accepted. They might be the individuals reviewing your work in the future. They might be collaborators. They might set you up with future individuals that could be your students. So for all of these reasons, it's so incredibly important, but it can be very uncomfortable as an academic to begin to build your research network. I understand that many people who go into academia don't do so because they're naturally charismatic or extroverted. You don't have to be. I think the truth is that most people in the field want connection, want community, but might not necessarily be inclined to do so. So I think you'll have an easier time than you expect building your research community, even if you're not very outgoing or an extrovert. So the first thing that you'll want to do is find your tribe. And I think this is where I see people fail. That's the first step, actually. It can be tricky to identify your unique group of people who are excited about your work and want to do similar work as yourself. You might be in a particular field where everyone's doing very similar work, so you know what your tribe is. You know the major conferences you go to, you know the journals you publish in. Okay, good enough. You might be someone who's interdisciplinary, so it's hard to find the right fit with one community not fully doing the work that you're doing, neither is another community. You're somewhere in the middle, right? So that can be really challenging. I think the trick is to identify the conferences for which your work is most appropriate. These are the places where you can present your work in terms of a poster or an abstract or potentially even a full paper. So figuring out which venue fits best for you. And it might be tricky as an interdisciplinary person finding that particular conference. So you might need to try out several conferences and you might fail. So be prepared to fail a little bit, where you go to one place and it doesn't feel quite right. You don't like what they're doing there, or maybe you don't like the people. So you try out a few different conferences. Allow this to be a trial and error period. Same thing for the different types of publication venues you might be sending your work to. Trial and error sort of thing. In addition to these external things like conferences and publications, you'll also want to consider looking within your university. In your department, that's a very sensible place to look for your network, but I would encourage you to think of outside of your department as well. There could be other departments where your work is actually really useful to them, and they're very excited about these types of collaborations. So you want to look kind of broadly within your university. Now, I think a mistake that students often make when trying to find their tribe is they focus on the colleagues that they have in their lab. So these are the other PhD students in your particular lab, and that is great. I think you should be friends with all of them. But I would say that there's a little bit of conflicting interest where they might not always be giving you advice or have your best interest in heart. Because in some ways you're competing for some resources, including your advisor's time or work on a particular project, etc. So focusing your tribe on just that group, I don't think is a metric for success. What you'll tend to find is one, maybe two people in your individual lab will go on to the same field as you and do the same type of work as you, which is surprising, right? You're all being trained in the same thing. But I see that consistently, that there's usually just a few people who end up going into academia from a particular lab, or a few people going into industry in this certain flavor of industry. So it's not as if these people will follow you forever. So you don't want to necessarily focus all of your efforts in finding your tribe on just those groups of people. I think a really successful technique is to look at the different research groups who are doing as similar work to yours at different universities. And you might see them as competitors. Maybe your advisor sees them as competitors, but think of them as future collaborators. Most of the time, people are nice and they want friends and they want to work with people. So the individuals who you might think you're competing against are actually potential collaborators. So taking a look at where they go to present their research in terms of conferences, where they're publishing at, is a really good idea. And also trying to seek opportunities to find one-on-one connections with those individuals, particularly PhD students at those competing labs, I think is a really smart approach to help you be successful in networking. Okay, hopefully you've identified your tribe, these groups of people who share similar interests or maybe have this interdisciplinary connection with your type of work. The next thing to do is to leverage networking opportunities. It's not easy just to send them an email and kind of show up and visit their lab. It's a little bit easier when people are already doing these network-like activities and kind of join in. The major one obviously is conferences. You definitely need to get good at working the conference. I think that will very much help you. Some of my tips for working conferences are to think about workshops. Workshops are special in that they're a dedicated amount of time where it's more interactive, where people are doing something often or they're more in a group. So this gives you more one-on-one time to interact with the people that you're trying to build your tribe and your network within. Along those same lines, you might consider organizing a conference. I think some of the most well-connected PhD students are those who asked their PhD advisor if they could organize a conference. And in doing so, they have to connect with the major players in the field and get conference submissions, etc. So that's a really good opportunity. It's a pretty big time investment, but it will absolutely put you at the top of the list in terms of networking for your particular tribe. And when you are going to conferences, you need to make the most of them. So a good rule of thumb is to never eat alone. That can be scary. I don't always do that. I wish I did more. But I think that's a pretty hard rule. But some people say that are good at conferences, never eat alone, find someone else to eat a meal with. I think for me, the most successful I've been is when I've scheduled meetings in advance. So a few weeks before the conference, not too early, but like 2 weeks before the conference, reach out to the individuals you're hoping to meet and find some time to meet with them in advance. So these are things like scheduling dinners, scheduling lunches, finding them at coffee breaks. This will be easiest for individuals that are at your same level, so other PhD students and maybe postdocs as well. You will probably be less successful when you do this for faculty members or professors because all of their people of their level are doing the same thing and they often want to meet up with their friends and have dinner with them. So their time on their schedule is very, very limited and they might be trying to save that time for other people that are kind of at their same level. So consider as a PhD student looking for other PhD students or groups as well as postdocs to network with. My other favorite pro tip for working a conference is to strategically sit by people that you want to strike up a conversation with. So that means you need to have a good sense of what people look like when you show up to a room where there's a talk. You kind of need to know what people look like to go sit by appropriate people. I didn't early on. I often found myself talking to people that were famous and I didn't know who they were. So be careful when you're at a conference not to say like, oh, who are you? Because it could be the case that you're supposed to know who that person is. I would just pretend like you know everyone and just look them up later. Okay, hot tip. But in any case, you want to try to sit next to people that you want to have conversations with. I find that if I don't know anyone in the room, I can't visually identify anyone, I go sit up at the front because all of the important people at the talks will be at the front because they're going to be presenting or they're going to want to take pictures of their colleagues presenting, etc. So that's kind of a fun way just to happen to sit next to someone that you might want to strike up a conversation with. For me, that's actually led to 2 of my major collaborations, was just happening to sit by someone and striking up a conversation at a conference. Okay, let's say you've made all of these connections. How do you turn connections into collaborations? And I think this is something that I'm quite good at, but this can be the tricky part, right? You might know a bunch of people, but how do you translate that to anything, quote unquote, useful for your research? I think the major thing that you want to do is to be generous with your time and resources. This means that if you hear of someone applying for a grant and you've gotten that grant too, share your grant materials, all of them. Don't hold back, okay? You're building a friendship, and in order to build friendships, there has to be a certain level of trust that goes into that. For example, when my friends were applying for faculty positions, I sent them my offer letters that I've gotten from other places so they can see how to calibrate what their expectations are from those different universities. That might seem scary, you're putting yourself out there, but that has worked 100% for me. I learned it from one of my close friends who did the exact same thing. He makes all of his materials available to anyone who asks, and it's really this very generous, open way of sharing and building community. The next part of that is being willing to ask for materials yourself. Some of my closest collaborations started with me connecting with someone who is a little more senior than myself and asking them for support, asking them to look over a report that I was submitting, or asking if they had any materials that they'd be willing to share with me. Basically, the whole reason that I've been successful with grants and applications is I've seen other people's successful grants and applications and have mirrored what they did, the moves that they made. And I was only able to do that by directly asking people that I knew if they'd be willing to share. Most of the time they are, and if they're not, you have to respect that as well. But I've never had the case where someone was unwilling to share materials with me. Okay, at this point you're building trust, right? You're giving and receiving materials. The next part is to try to find an idea that you might be willing to work on together. And so the best way to do this is to bring something and ask for something. So when you're bringing something to a collaboration, this might mean you're willing to do the legwork in terms of organization, setting up meetings, taking notes, having the idea itself, okay? So you're bringing in the energy to kind of drive the project, and maybe they're bringing in their expertise, and together you're going to do a collaboration that will ultimately be successful. But you need to bring something in, some set of skills or energy into the project, and allow other people to bring in their expertise as well. And my last piece of advice for having those collaborations be successful is to have an end goal. Before you establish that collaboration, you need to decide, why are we doing this? So you have something to work for. That could be you're planning on submitting a paper that has a deadline, okay? Or you're planning to submit a grant that has a deadline, or you're working towards something. It is unsuccessful usually to have people come together and there's no real goal, because they just simply won't prioritize that, and neither will you. Okay, and the last thing to talk about in terms of building your research community is maintaining these connections. You've done all this groundwork, great. Sometimes you can do all of the legwork and then the connections kind of fizzle if you're not really maintaining and keeping up with that, and that is a lot of work too. So the major things you're going to want to do is stay in touch with all of these individuals. Even if you're not necessarily doing a direct collaboration, you can still reach out, you can still connect with them, ask how they're doing, see what type of research they're up to. I think a more successful approach for that is anytime you know you're going to be in the same area, reach out to them in advance and ask to connect, right? You might not have anything to talk about, but you just want to have dinner and enjoy each other's company, okay? So you want to make sure that if you do happen to be in the same area, reach out to the people that you've made connections with and find times to connect, even in small ways, for a coffee or a chat or a drink. All of those things will help you maintain the connections that you've developed. The other major thing you might consider doing is finding a way to communicate more informally. So this could be by having an email group of people that you are interested in building community with. My community has a Slack channel where we post questions for other faculty to answer, or just general thoughts or memes about what's going on in our lives. That is really, really effective. Just have a low stakes way of kind of checking in on everyone, making sure everyone's doing okay, sharing things that make us happy, etc. You want to find what works for your community. We like Slack, you might like Discord. Maybe you don't want to do this type of thing at all. Maybe you want to do a monthly newsletter. Whatever it is for your community, find a way to have these more informal conversations that can just ensure that you're keeping those connections strong. That's my advice for building networks as a PhD student. I truly think that it is very powerful to have a strong research community that will follow you throughout your entire career. These people can not only be your collaborators, but your true friends, and bring lots of joy and excitement and help you stay in this career for the long term. If you found this video useful, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe for more content on academic success. Take care.